There comes a stage in life where reacting becomes unnecessary, not because you are weak, but because you are wise. Reaction is often the language of insecurity, while silence is the posture of strength. When people provoke you, misunderstand you, disrespect your boundaries, or drain your peace, the most powerful response is not confrontation. It is quiet separation. Not every offense deserves your explanation. Not every misunderstanding deserves clarification. And not every relationship deserves access to your energy. When you react emotionally, you give control of your inner world to external behavior. But when you remain calm and choose distance, you take your power back. Silence is not passive, it is intentional. Cutting people off silently is not hatred, it is self-respect. It means you have recognized that engagement no longer produces growth, understanding, or peace. It means you value your purpose more than proving a point. Maturity teaches you that arguments rarely change minds, but boundaries change outcomes. There are people who thrive on your reactions. They feed on your explanations, your anger, and your emotional investment. When you stop reacting, you starve the dysfunction. When you stop explaining, you reclaim your time. When you walk away quietly, you deny chaos access to your destiny. Growth often requires subtraction. You cannot elevate while constantly negotiating with distraction. You cannot hear clearly while surrounded by noise. Cutting someone off silently is sometimes the clearest message you can send, because your absence speaks louder than any words ever could. This discipline requires strength. It is easier to react than to restrain. It is easier to argue than to disengage. But emotional mastery is a sign of leadership. Those who understand their assignment do not waste energy on battles that are beneath their calling. Peace is expensive. It costs you relationships, comfort, and familiarity. But it pays you back with clarity, focus, and direction. When you choose silence over reaction, you choose purpose over pride. And when you quietly move forward, you allow results, not explanations, to speak on your behalf. Sometimes the most powerful move is not to announce your departure, but to simply leave calmly, quietly, and permanently. Reaction transfers authority. Restraint preserves dominion. This truth reveals why so many people feel exhausted, distracted, and emotionally defeated, not because they lack strength, but because they give it away every time they react. Reaction is the moment you allow someone else's behavior to dictate your internal state. The instant you react without restraint, you surrender leadership over your emotions, your thoughts, and often your decisions. Authority shifts quietly, and before you realize it, you are no longer directing your life, you are responding to it. Restraint, on the other hand, is not weakness. It is evidence of mastery. It means you have learned how to govern yourself before attempting to govern situations. Dominion begins internally. Anyone can react when offended, challenged, or misunderstood, but only those with discipline can pause, evaluate, and choose their response intentionally. That pause is powerful. In that space, authority remains with you. You decide whether an issue deserves engagement or silence, correction or distance, confrontation or withdrawal. When people provoke you and you react emotionally, they gain leverage. Your anger gives them influence. Your explanations give them importance. Your defensiveness gives them access. Reaction fuels their relevance. But restraint removes their power. When you do not respond impulsively, you refuse to elevate distractions to the level of significance. You maintain control over your time, energy, and direction. That control is dominion. True strength is revealed in the ability to remain composed under pressure. Restraint requires self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and purpose. Those who know where they are going cannot afford to be pulled into every conflict along the way. They understand that reacting to everything is a sign of aimlessness, while restraint signals clarity. When your purpose is clear, your reactions become selective. Restraint also protects your judgment. Emotional reactions often lead to decisions that contradict long-term goals. Words spoken in anger cannot be retrieved. Actions taken impulsively can cost relationships credibility and opportunities. But restraint creates space for wisdom. It allows logic to override impulse and vision to outweigh emotion. In that space, you make choices aligned with your future rather than your feelings. Dominion is not about controlling others. It is about governing yourself. The moment someone can trigger you at will, they possess authority over you. But when you remain calm, regardless of external behavior, You demonstrate independence of spirit. You show that your peace is not rented out to opinions, insults, or manipulation. You become unmovable. Restraint also commands respect. People may not always understand your silence, but they will feel its weight. Composure unsettles chaos. Calm disarms aggression. When you do not react, you force others to confront themselves rather than feed off your energy. Your restraint sets a boundary without explanation. Ultimately, reaction is costly, but restraint is profitable. Reaction drains energy. Restraint multiplies it. Reaction scatters focus. Restraint sharpens it. Reaction hands over authority. Restraint preserves dominion. When you learn to master your responses, you reclaim leadership over your life. And in that mastery, you rise not loudly, not impulsively, but with quiet, unshakable power. Access is a privilege, not a right. This understanding marks the transition from emotional survival to intentional living. Many people struggle not because they lack ability or vision, but because they allow unrestricted access to their time, energy, thoughts, and inner world. When access is given freely without discernment, it becomes easy for others to interrupt your peace, dilute your focus, and influence your decision. Recognizing that access must be earned is an act of self-respect and wisdom. Not everyone who enters your life deserves to remain. Some people are only meant to observe from a distance, not participate in your process. Allowing everyone to have unlimited access invites confusion, misuse, and emotional exhaustion. Boundaries are not walls built out of fear. They are gates built out of clarity. They allow you to choose who comes close and who remains outside without guilt or explanation. When you treat access as a right, you feel obligated to explain yourself, justify your choices, and accommodate behavior that disrupts your growth. But when you understand access as a privilege, you realize that proximity must align with purpose. People who disrespect your values, ignore your boundaries, or consistently drain your energy disqualify themselves from closeness. Distance becomes a natural consequence, not a punishment. Access also influences direction. Those closest to you shape how you think, what you tolerate, and what you believe is possible. When you allow the wrong voices into your space, they distort your vision. Doubt, negativity, and insecurity often enter quietly through unchecked access. Protecting your inner circle is not arrogance, it is responsibility. You are accountable for the environment you allow to shape you. Limiting access requires courage. Some people will resist your boundaries because they benefited from your openness. They may accuse you of changing, becoming distant, or acting differently. But growth always changes access. As your awareness increases, your standards rise. What once felt normal begins to feel heavy. What once felt acceptable begins to feel misaligned. Adjusting access is not betrayal, it is alignment. Access should be based on consistency, character, and contribution, not familiarity alone. Time does not entitle someone to your inner world. History does not guarantee trust. Access must be continually evaluated. Who supports your progress? Who respects your boundaries? Who adds value rather than drains it? These questions help you steward your emotional and mental space wisely. When access is earned, relationships deepen. Mutual respect replaces obligation. Peace replaces pressure. You are no longer performing to be accepted. You are simply being selective about who shares your journey. This selectivity allows you to show up fully without resentment or burnout. Ultimately, protecting access protects purpose. You cannot fulfill your assignment while constantly managing unnecessary interference. When you understand that access is a privilege, you reclaim authority over your life. You choose peace over people-pleasing, clarity over chaos, and purpose over familiarity. And in doing so, you create a life that is intentional, balanced, and deeply aligned with who you are becoming. Silence is a strategic language. It is often misunderstood as weakness, avoidance, or fear, yet in reality, it is one of the most powerful tools of wisdom and self-mastery. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is a deliberate choice to withhold unnecessary words in order to preserve clarity, authority, and peace. Those who understand the value of silence Know that not every situation requires a response, and not every voice deserves engagement. In a world that rewards noise, reactions, and instant replies, silence becomes a form of discipline. Speaking impulsively often reveals more than it resolves. Words spoken too quickly can expose emotions, intentions, and vulnerabilities that should have remained protected. Silence, however, allows you to observe rather than react, to listen rather than defend, and to think rather than justify. It creates space for discernment, and in that space, strategy is formed. Silence shifts power. When you refuse to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, you deny them control over your emotions. Many conflicts persist, not because of unresolved issues, but because someone continues to feed the situation with words. Silence interrupts that cycle. It removes fuel from the fire and forces clarity. When there is no reaction to manipulate, motives are exposed and intentions become clear. Silence also communicates boundaries more effectively than repeated explanation. You can talk endlessly about respect, but silence demonstrates it. When you withdraw your voice, attention, or presence, you send a clear message without confrontation. This kind of communication is firm yet dignified. It does not beg for validation or demand understanding. It simply establishes limits and allows actions to speak. Strategic silence protects your inner world. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, plans, or emotions. Oversharing often leads to unnecessary opinions, criticism, and interference. Silence safeguards vision. It keeps your focus intact and your momentum uninterrupted. Those who move with purpose understand that revealing everything too soon can sabotage progress. Silence allows growth to mature without pressure. Silence is also a test. It reveals who respects you and who only valued your reaction. When you stop responding, some people fade, others adjust, and a few reveal their true intentions. This clarity is invaluable. It helps you discern which relationships are based on mutual respect and which were sustained by emotional availability alone. Choosing silence requires strength. It takes discipline to restrain the urge to explain, correct, or defend. But restraint builds authority. When you speak less, your words carry more weight. When you remain composed, your presence commands attention. Silence trains others to take you seriously, not because you demand it, but because you demonstrate control. Ultimately, silence is not withdrawal from life. It is alignment with purpose. It is a language spoken by those who understand timing, value peace, and prioritize growth. When used wisely, silence protects your energy, clarifies your direction, and preserves your authority. It is not empty, it is intentional. And in its stillness, it speaks louder than words ever could. Purpose demands emotional discipline. A meaningful life cannot be built on unmanaged emotions, because emotions are powerful but unstable guides. They rise and fall based on circumstances, opinions, and temporary experiences. Purpose, however, requires consistency, clarity, and long-term commitment. Without emotional discipline, even the most gifted individuals become distracted, reactive, and ineffective. Not because they lack potential, but because they allow feelings to override direction. Emotional discipline is the ability to feel deeply without being ruled by those feelings. It does not deny emotion, it governs it. Those who lack this discipline often make decisions in moments of anger, fear, or excitement, only to regret them later. A purposeful living demands restraint, because destiny is shaped by repeated choices, not momentary reactions. Every impulsive response carries consequences that can delay or derail progress. When emotions lead, focus suffers. Offense steals attention. Jealousy distorts perception. Fear shrinks vision. Pride resists correction. Each uncontrolled emotion competes with purpose for authority. Emotional discipline restores order by placing reason, values, and vision above impulse. It ensures that actions align with long-term goals rather than short-term relief. Purpose also attracts pressure. Growth brings criticism, misunderstanding, and resistance. Without emotional discipline, these external forces can easily provoke discouragement or retaliation. But those anchored in purpose learn to remain steady. They understand that not every comment requires a response, and not every challenge requires confrontation. Stability becomes their advantage. While others react, they continue building. Emotional discipline protects relationships as well. Purpose-driven individuals cannot afford to damage trust through careless words or uncontrolled reactions. Emotional outbursts may feel justified in the moment, but they often weaken credibility and influence. Discipline teaches when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to walk away. This wisdom preserves connections that are essential for growth. Discipline also sustains momentum. Purpose is not fulfilled in a single decision. It unfolds over time. Emotional highs fade and emotional lows test endurance. Those who rely on motivation alone quit when feelings change. Emotional discipline keeps you moving even when excitement disappears. It replaces motivation with commitment, ensuring that progress continues regardless of mood. Self-mastery is at the core of emotional discipline. You cannot control circumstances, but you can control your response to them. This mastery produces confidence, not arrogance. It allows you to face uncertainty without panic and success without losing balance. You become reliable, grounded, and consistent, qualities that attract trust and responsibility. Ultimately, purpose demands emotional discipline because destiny requires stability. Vision cannot be fulfilled by impulse, and calling cannot be sustained by feelings alone. When emotions are disciplined, energy is focused, decisions are wiser, and progress is steady. You no longer react to life, you direct it. And in that discipline, purpose finds the structure it needs to become reality. Growth requires separation. Every stage of development demands distance from something familiar in order to reach something greater. Many people desire growth but resist separation, not realizing that progress and attachment cannot coexist indefinitely. What once supported you may eventually restrict you. Growth begins when you recognize that holding on to everything will cost you the very future you are trying to build. Separation is not rejection. It is recognition. It is the awareness that certain environments, habits, conversations, and relationships no longer align with who you are becoming. Remaining connected to what no longer fits creates inner conflict. You feel the tension between comfort and calling. Growth resolves that tension by requiring a decision to move forward or remain where you are. Every level has a language, a mindset, and a standard. When you grow, your values shift, your priorities change, and your tolerance decreases. What once felt normal begins to feel heavy. What once felt exciting begins to feel distracting. Separation naturally follows growth because alignment matters. You cannot rise while constantly adjusting yourself to fit spaces that were designed for a previous version of you. Separation is often quiet and misunderstood. You may not announce it, explain it, or justify it. You simply change. You respond less, engage selectively, and protect your focus. This silence can be uncomfortable, especially when others expect the same access they once had. But growth does not ask for permission. It demands obedience to vision over familiarity. Without separation, growth is slowed. Wrong influences dilute discipline. Constant noise weakens clarity. Emotional attachments drain energy needed for progress. Separation creates space to think, to heal, to learn, and to build. It allows you to hear your own direction without interference. In that space, confidence strengthens and purpose becomes clearer. Separation also reveals truth. It shows who respects your evolution and who resists it. Some will celebrate your growth, others will feel threatened by it. This reaction is not your responsibility. Growth will always disturb those who benefit from your stagnation. Choosing separation is choosing self-respect over approval. This process requires courage. Letting go of people, routines, or identities can feel like loss. But separation is not loss, it is investment. You are investing in clarity, alignment, and future capacity. What you release creates room for what you are becoming. Growth cannot occupy a space that is already full. Ultimately, growth requires separation because elevation demands focus. You cannot carry everything upward. Some things must be left behind so your hands are free to build. When you accept separation as part of growth, you stop apologizing for change and start embracing transformation. And in that willingness to separate, you discover that growth is not just about moving. Forwarded is about becoming aligned with the future you were meant to reach.